Welcome to the table. My name is Cody. I get to be one of the pastors here, and we are in the book of James today. James chapter 1, verses 12 through 18. And welcome to the table. If you have a Bible with you, you can go ahead and open them up. If you don't, not a big deal. It's going to be on the screen for you as well. And we're going to go ahead and jump in here. Happy Mother's Day, you guys. And I'll go ahead and read this, and then I'll let you have a seat, and we'll dive into this text today. So here we go. James chapter 1, verses 12 through 18. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So let's go ahead and pray. Lord Jesus, we want to thank you for this day. Thank you for our moms. Lord, I pray that as we go through this word today, your word, that Lord, we would get some tools from the text for how we can do what you have admonished us to do, what you have exhorted us to do through your word, and that is to be able to count our trials as joy. That we can count it all joy when we experience these various kinds of trials. And Lord, even in any size room, in any size church, God, there are going to be all kinds of trials represented in that gathered group of people. And so I'm so thankful that your word says various, not just one specific kind of trial, but all kinds of trials. We are to count it joy. God, that's hard. Lord, I pray that as I open your word up today, that you would give us some tools so we could kind of figure out maybe how we can do that. Because God, we want to be obedient. We want to love you well. We want to trust you. We want to believe. So God, would you help us this day? It's in your good name we pray. Amen. All right, you may have a seat. As I said, happy Mother's Day. We opened the book of James a couple of weeks ago with this exhortation, this admonition to count it all joy when you encounter various trials. And today we're going to look at some reasons or some tools maybe to help us be able to do that. So moms, I hope that I give you a little bit of encouragement today. If you are a mom, no doubt you have encountered various kinds of trials, right? Amen? I remember I had at former church that I was at, had a deacon in that church by the name of Dusty Pruitt. Dusty was a giant of a man, soft-spoken, and our kids were little at that time. They were, 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. We didn't have Karis yet, and we were battling the terrible twos, which somehow lasted beyond 2, and trying to potty train and naps and figure, and then fighting with one another, and just there are joys, but there are also difficulties within that, right? And I was kind of lamenting, complaining, bemoaning this stage of life. And I remember Dusty Pruitt put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "You're going to miss this one day." And in my arrogance and sharp, stupid tongue, I looked right back at him and I said, "Well, I can't wait to miss it." And now I do. Okay? So, parents of toddlers, parents of teens, parents, if you're a parent, just, I don't know if you, I don't have, I'm not a parent of a 30-year-old yet. I don't know what that's like. If you do, come see me. I'd love to grab coffee and figure that out. But you are going to miss this one day, okay? I would exhort you to count it as joy. And don't bemoan it, lament it, complain about it, and say, I can't wait to miss it, okay? Don't repeat my lack of wisdom. So here's the big idea. I believe that we can. I believe that James has given us some tools how we can count our trials as joy with three things. When we know that the trials will pass, when we know that the trials are in and of themselves part of God's good design for us. We're going to see that, but we're out in the text. And then we can get to the place, hopefully, where we can say, oh, this trial is a gift. It's a gift. Like a burpee at a CrossFit gym. It's not enjoyable, but it is a gift. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the text. The first thing we look is like we can count trials as joy when we know that they will pass. When they know that this is not eternal. This is not going to be forever. Look at verse 12. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. There's that word again, steadfast. Dan talked about it last week. It came up in the first week when we were talking about this. Steadfast, it seems like that's something that God wants for us. It seems like we ought to pay attention to that. But he said, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. Well, what's the crown of life? That crown of life is something that, like, oh no, when you pass away, when you die, you're going to get this reward. It's going to be this crown of life. We know that from the biblical text and other places. And so we look at that like we have to kind of have this eternal perspective. Like this world is not our home. This is not all there is. Your trial, your suffering, your terrible twos, your terrible teens, your joblessness, your whatever it is, this is not all that there is. It's not all that there is. This will pass. And it's probably going to pass before you do. But even if it doesn't pass before you do, eventually it's going to pass. This idea of crown of life, God has laid up for us this eternity, which is, Paul talks about how it is beyond all of our imagination. Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, all the things that God has for those who love Him. There is a better day coming. And so that whatever comes our way during this time is meant to produce this steadfastness within us. This word steadfast, it comes up over and over and over again. We see it in chapter 2, or chapter 1, verse 3. He says, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. We see in verse 6, he says, that let him ask in faith with no doubting. That is kind of implied that there's steadfastness there. And then we see it here again in verse 12. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. Like God is trying to strengthen us to produce steadfastness within us. But it's not going to last forever. So moms, they're only 2 for a year. It's a long year, but they're only 2 for a year. When Silas was a little guy, I think he was probably a little bit older than 2, but not much older than that. In our home back in Oklahoma, the kitchen, there's kitchen sink, and then there's a window that looked out into the backyard. And right outside the backyard, we had a trampoline. Now, we didn't have a trampoline that was like, just you step out, it's a pit. Like you had to climb up and get onto the trampoline. And we had like a cage around it. And you can see through the cage. And Silas, who is our oldest, and he is like 22 years old, or about to be 22, and is now in the National Guard, and he's a strapping young man, and he's just, he's also single. Never mind. So that was not in the notes. I may pay for that later. I don't know. He's getting big enough he can whoop me. So unless I get some cheap shots in early, but But Lori was sitting there doing the dishes, and Silas, who was 2 or 3, 4 years old, was out on the trampoline, and he was punching and kicking and jumping, and he was always a very verbally expressive little guy with a great imagination. And Lori's watching this and just kind of taking joy in this. And then she begins looking closer, and she's like, "What is that in his pocket?" Now, you know how deep the pockets are on little boys' pants, right? It's like this. He had not one, but 2 of our steak knives in his pocket, handle side down, blade up, jumping on the trampoline, slaying dragons. The blade side up, I can only imagine, so that he could show the imagined dragon that he meant business. And he is jumping and flopping, and Lori's heart skipped a beat. And stop, freeze. Got the knives back. Now, I know that some of you that are a little bit more investigatory are like, well, what did Silas, how could he even have access to the knives? I don't know. I don't know. But nevertheless, they're only that age for a little while. They're only teens for a few years. It shall pass. Silas is still here today. Okay? I'm not saying that your toddler or your teen is a trial. They may be. I am saying definitively they do bring trials. It's you're living with a fallen human, and you're fallen yourself, and there's going to be trials that you're going to encounter. It passed. Silas is still with us. But our hope is not in Silas. It's in the Lord. And he's never left us, and he's never forsaken us. And even if we would have lost Silas to a self-inflicted knife wound, we wouldn't have lost the Lord, because he doesn't lose us. God does not lose what he has found. God never loses what he finds. His grip is sure. His strength is unmatched. Jesus said, if anyone is in the Father's hand, no one can pluck him out. Like he is not going to let go. James tells us that this blessing, that the blessing of remaining steadfast, comes to those who love him. He's promised that for those who love him. So the question is, do you love God? If so, then God has promised you, dear brother, dear sister, dear mom, dear dad, life eternal, beyond the pain, beyond the trial, and beyond the heartache. And he is using that pain and using that trial and using that heartache to produce steadfastness in you. For now. But the pain and the heartache and the trial will not last forever. It will pass. You will receive a crown of joy, a crown of life. Those who love him. So it's exclusive. It's for the Christian. It's for the one who's put their faith and hope and trust in Jesus, in God, in what he has accomplished for us through Jesus. And we want to encourage you to believe and put your faith and hope and trust in that. So, we can consider trials a joy because this life, with its trappings and its trials, its heartache and its pain, it will pass one day. It's not forever. Your pain is not forever. Your trial is not forever. It will pass. So you can count it joy that way. Number 2, trials are also a reason for joy because we are promised that they are part of God's good purposes. Unlike temptations to evil, which intend death. Now, the reason I strengthen that is because of these next few verses, and I want to try to unpack this a little bit. Verse 13 says, "Let no one say when he is tempted." Now, it's unfortunate that in the English translation, I understand why they did it, and sometimes you have to go back and you have to kind of unpack this a little bit more. The word tempted there is the same word for trial. Now, if you're reading that, and if you were reading that like these guys were in the original language, and they would have seen that, they would have said, "Now wait a minute. He's saying that trials are from God. Now it seems like he's using the same word and says that that's not from God. If it's the same word, how do you distinguish which one is from God and which one is not?" Because that's what he goes on and says. Listen to verses 13 through 15. "Let no one say when he is tempted," same word as trial, "I'm being tempted, trialed by God. For God cannot be tempted, trialed by evil, and he himself trials, tempts no one." Do you see how confusing that would be if you're one of the original recipients of this? I know how, I just confused all of you just now. I just confused myself. But each person is tempted, trialed, when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. How do we tell the difference? First of all, before we jump into this, I want to I just want to acknowledge something. I think that James is just being brutally honest. He's being really vulnerable, and he's sharing with people. It's like, it really is possible. It really is maybe not even possible. It may be probable that when you're going through a trial and you're going through it, you may start to think that God is against you. It may feel that way. You may pray things like, "God, what do you have against me? God, why are you making this so hard? God, what have I done?" And you start to think that God's really not for you. Like, you have the word that He's for you and not against you, but everything else in your life, it may not feel like that at all. And I understand facts aren't feelings, and I get all that. I understand that. But feelings are still real. And we're in process. We're figuring this stuff out. So how do we tell the difference? And the difference is with the motivation. What is the intention behind it? Here's what I mean. How do you tell the difference between a trial that is for your good and meant to produce steadfastness within you, and a temptation that is meant for your destruction? How do you tell the difference between something that is supposed to bring you, a trial that is supposed to bring you closer to God, and a temptation that takes you further away from God? Kind of like this. How do you tell the difference between accusation and conviction? One is designed to drive you away from God, and the other is designed to bring you closer to Him. It is all about the motive. It is all about the intention, which is why James says, God doesn't tempt people. It may be the same word, it may look the same, may feel the same, but God is never trying to drive you away from Him. That is not what He's trying to do with your trial. He is not tempting you. A trial is part of God's good plan and His good purposes. Temptation intends death. That's what the text says. That temptation, each one is tempted when by his own desire, some translations say his own evil desire, he is lured and then gives way to sin, and then sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. That's what temptation is meant to take you away from God. Trial is meant to push you toward God. That's the difference. It's the motivation, it's the intention behind it. Trials are designed to bring you closer to God. Temptation is designed to take you away, to take you further from God. So this is a good time to just maybe reflect. I don't know what your trial is right now. I don't know what your temptation is, but can you take and just, in a moment of maybe just honesty and transparency and just kind of getting honest with God, saying, okay, what is this thing that I'm going through? Is this meant to take me away, or is this meant to draw? Is it pushing me closer? And maybe that's a thing to say. What is it doing? Not maybe what should it be doing, but what is it doing? Is it pushing me toward God? Is it pushing me away from God? What are the questions I'm asking about God? Who do I think God is? Has this thing changed my mind about who I think God is? So, trials are a reason for joy because we're promised that they're part of God's good purposes. If you lose that, it's going to be very, very difficult to worship Jesus. It's going to be very, very difficult to trust Him and to believe. And you may begin to see your trial as a temptation. And the real danger of that is because if you start to see your trial, which is meant to be a good gift from a good God, and if you start to see that as a temptation, and you actually start to believe that God is actually against you and is trying to push you away from Him and is not actually for you but is against you, that's a hard thing to come back from. And James wants these people to know who are undergoing trials, God's not against them. This is a plan. He is for them. He is wanting to bring them closer to Him. He knows that it's hard, but He's not against them. And He wants us to know that as well. Thirdly, as we look at verses 16 and 17. And this is where we want to get to. If you're there, praise God. And if you're not there, it's okay. You'll get there, okay? Because God's good, and He has a plan, and He's not going to give up on you. He's going to be with you, and I know you may not understand it all now, but He's for you. And you may be sitting there saying, I can't wait to miss this trial. And hang on, there'll be a day when you might, okay? Verse 16, he says, do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. He said, well, why would he be deceived? And that every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. He's saying, hey, this God that we have, He's not changed His mind about you. He's not looking at you. We'll go ahead and put it in the context of moms. He's not looking at you and saying, you know, I was going to be a good dad to you while you were the parent of a 2 or 3 year old. But I've changed my mind, and I'm just going to let you be on your own until they get to be a teenager. No, he does not vary and change like that. God is not capricious. He's not like that. He is constant. He is consistent. He's good. And so James is able to look at this and say, listen, don't be deceived and to start thinking that God is tempting you. Don't be deceived that way. But understand that this trial, and that because that's the context that he's talking about, and then he says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. This is an appeal to God's sovereignty. That God is not up there, He's not up there in heaven like aloof and unaware of what's going on. Theologically, it's not a theologically aware prayer to go to God and say, God, can you see me? He can. His eye has never left you. He knows exactly what you're going through. Okay? But there's times that we feel that. And these people were going through trial. They had been kicked out of Jerusalem. They had lost family. They had lost homes. They had lost jobs. They're going through it. And James is also one of those that is going through it. He's remained in Jerusalem, but basically his whole congregation, he's lost them. You know how tough that is on a pastor? Like, you're pastoring a church of, I don't know, 300, 400, well, probably more than that. I mean, at one time, there was like 3,000 people got saved on one day, 5,000 on another day. Like, he's a mega church pastor. Now they can't pay the bills. They're all gone. Persecution has driven the entire church out of the city. They are just trying to scrape by. He understands this as well. And he's let this pain drive him to the Lord. And so James is not just giving them platitudes. I believe James is preaching from what he has experienced himself. And he's able to say trials are actually a good gift from the Father. And I think he's even saying they're a perfect gift from the Father. And the reason they're a perfect gift and a good gift from the Father is because he's a good and perfect Father. He doesn't make mistakes. He's not unaware of the trial that you're going through. He's not just up there aloof. You know, you're never going to come to God and say, God, this is really hard. I don't know what to do here. And God say, oh, I'm sorry. I had no idea that was happening to you. That's not, no, it's not going to happen like that. He knows it. James wisely warns us against being deceived. He knows all too well how easy it is to start believing that God is against you when times are hard. But trials, since they are part of God's plan and purpose for our life to produce steadfastness, they can be counted as joy as such. Like the CrossFitter counts the burpee as joy. It's like a hard workout. Sure, I'm not saying that you have to be like a masochist and just enjoy the pain. I'm not saying that. But it is like the athlete, they can embrace, you know, I think the term they use for it is like embracing the suck. Like this is hard to go through, and you just embrace it, and it's gonna hurt, but you know what it is producing in you. You know that this temporary pain is producing this steadfast, it's producing this longevity, it's producing this wind it's producing this strength. This momentary tearing down of the muscle fibers is necessary so that the muscle can rebuild itself stronger and have stronger bonds. And God is a great coach. He is such a great coach that he refuses to let you design your own workouts. Now, for the people who work out, you're shaking your heads. For those of you who don't, kind of like me, you're like, well, why wouldn't he? Here's the thing with self-sovereign workouts. You're probably never going to push yourself as hard as someone else will. And you'll never push yourself to trial the way God will push you. And because you won't, you'll never develop the steadfastness that you need, but won't go through the pain to get there. So God, being a good dad, a perfect dad, a good coach, who knows what you need. He understands every fiber of your body, spiritually, physically, emotionally, psychologically. He knows you through and through. He created every atom in your body. He knows every skin cell that you have shed and lost. He knows how many brain cells are going to die. He knows the hairs on your head. He knows everything about you, down to the deepest core. He knows you better than you know yourself. And He is a good coach. And He will put on you trial to develop this. And so if you can really get a hold of that and believe that, you'll be able to say, thank you, Lord. Thank you for this. There's no variation or shadow due to change. He's not going to quit on you. He is not one way today and another way tomorrow. He's not a good coach last week and a bad coach next week. It's not like that. You know, looking back on the trials with our kids when they were little, I don't even remember too many of them now. Like, I remember the knife story because it's just such a good one. Right? But all the other, I don't remember too many of those now. They passed. And they produced steadfastness in us and in our kids. And God, in His kindness, He gave us some pretty awesome kids. He's such a good father. He's such a good coach. He is so wise and so generous and so compassionate and so smart. He's just such a good dad. We wrap it up and we close with verse 18. He gives this throwback to birth. It's talking about spiritual birth, but you can see it. This is kind of a birth metaphor as he writes it. Of His own will He brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of His creatures. These are primarily Jewish background believers. They would have understand like first fruits, and they talking about first fruits of the harvest, the first fruits of the womb, and this idea of being brought forth. They would have understood this birthing type narrative. So he's closing this passage with this nod to our new birth. And we know that Jesus had a conversation with a guy late at night one time. This guy named Nicodemus, who was thoroughly Jewish, raised and was a scholar. And he says, I want to talk to you. And they start talking, and Jesus just kind of gets right to it, and he goes, no one can see God unless he's born again. And Nicodemus, being a good Jewish scholar, he goes, well, how can a man be born again? Does he just re-enter into his mom's womb? Like, that seems crazy. And God says, you're a teacher of Israel and you don't understand these things? Like, that which is born of flesh is flesh, but that which is born of spirit, it's different. And he begins to understand. He goes, no, you must be born again. You must have this change, this experience, and you've got to be born again. And that's what James is alluding to. Now remember, James is Jesus' little brother. Right? He says, of His own will, He brought us forth by the word of truth. I want you to think about your physical birth. How many of you remember it? Nobody? Shocked at you guys. I don't remember mine either. I only know what I was told, right? I began giving this some thought, especially as I'm preparing this. I think that the reason we don't remember our physical birth, I think it was pretty traumatic. Like, I was there for Silas's birth, and his head was not right. I cannot imagine the massive headache that he had. It had to have just hurt like crazy. No wonder he was crying when he came. I mean, think about this for just a second. The kid comes out, and like blinding light. You've been in total pitch dark your whole life. Some of y'all are going to experience this a little bit when we turn the house lights on after the service is over. You're going to have a birthing experience. Okay? It's kind of like that. You're like total darkness, blinding light. Then some stranger that you've never met, who may or may not have used tongs to pull you out, starts just whacking you on the back. And you have to regurgitate all this stuff that's in your system, which then programs your body to completely reboot a whole new oxygenation system. That just doesn't sound fun. That sounds like a trial. And praise God, none of us remember it. We don't remember it. And it's like that way with a lot of our trials. This will pass. It's not going to last forever. It's a good gift from a good God. He's using it to produce steadfastness in us. But think about this. Of His own will, He brought us forth. It's not of our will. I'm going to tell you something that sometimes I say controversial things that you can kind of push back on. I'm going to say something that I am completely right, and you cannot argue this. Okay? I'm just warning you right now. You cannot argue against me with the thing I'm about to say to you. Are you ready for this? You had no choice in your physical birth. Deal with it. You had no say. You just had no say. Like there were forces at work that were way beyond your control. You had no choice in whether or not you were brought into this world. That was something totally beyond you, beyond your strength, beyond your comprehension, beyond your ability. And James is likening this to our spiritual birth as well. Of His own will, He brought us forth. Do you see the passive nature of that? He doesn't say, of your own will, you became a child of God. No. Of His own will, you became a child of God. We weren't brought forth physically on our own free will, and we weren't brought forth spiritually of our own free will either. We had to be acted upon by an outside force. This is how good God is, that He takes and He brings us forward. I'm just going to tell you something right now. You are not as autonomous as you think you are, and neither am I. You didn't even name yourself. You didn't create yourself. You didn't birth yourself. You didn't name yourself. You didn't even choose the city you were born in. We're just not as autonomous as we think we are. How did God do this? How did God bring us forth? By the word of truth. That's what the word says. How did God bring light into darkness at creation? By His word. God spoke and it happened. By His word. This is why we believe in preaching the Bible. Because the Bible is powerful. It's God's word. That's how He brings people into relationship with Himself, is by His word. So how did God bring light into your darkened heart? By the same. By His word. And the gospel is good news to believe, not good advice to follow. It's believing in what God has done. Not saying, this is what I should do so that I can be a better person. That's not the gospel. The gospel is, no, believe in what God has done. And when you really put your faith and hope in that, that will change you. That will make you alive. Jesus paid it all of our sin, fully, finally atoned for on the cross. But He didn't stay dead. He rose from the grave. He rose for our justification. And so He is alive. He is the first fruits of the resurrection. He is the example that God is wanting us to follow. And Jesus' own life, full of trials. Our example. Our life, it's going to have trials too. But we're on this trajectory to follow Christ. So, as we wrap this thing up, my question is, do you believe? Do you love God? You should. You should. He gave Jesus for you. Jesus died for you. You no longer have to work for His love or for His approval or for His merit or for good standing. He has given Jesus for you. The gospel is good news to believe, not good advice to follow. And so if you believe that, then I want to encourage you. If you already believe that and you're a member of this church or you're a member of another church in good standing, you've walking with Jesus and you're following Him, then we want to invite you to come take communion and celebrate that's where your identity is and what Christ has done and what He's provided for you. The bread represents His body given for us, His righteousness that is given to us. And the juice represents His blood that was shed for us, a sacrifice that covers all of our sin. And we do this knowing that He is the resurrected Lord, that He didn't stay dead, but He's paid for all of our sin, He's risen for our justification, and it's through Him that we have right relationship with God. And some of you may say, well, Cody, I don't know if I'm a Christian like that. I don't know if I believe like that. That's cool. You don't have to come and pretend that you're something that you're not. But you can, there's a step for you. You say, well, what is it? If I'm not taking communion, is it going to look weird? I'm sitting here in my seat and other people moving? No, not everybody here takes communion. It's all right. Your step is maybe to, like, one of those cards that's on your row somewhere, saying, I want to have a conversation. I want to figure out, where do I stand with God? I'd love to just talk with someone. And you can get in line and come back around there, and you can drop it in the giving box on the way out if you want to be like really like incognito about it. Or if you just want to go give it to somebody at the info table, or give it to me at the end of the service and say, I want to pursue this. I want to know what it means to believe. I want to know what it means to trust in Him fully. I want to know what it means to love God and not just use God. We'd love to talk with you about that. So fill out one of those cards and let's set up a time. Let's talk. For others of you, it may just be a matter of getting into a community group, starting to serve on a team, to start having community in this fellowship of believers. And there's a card for that too. Just give it to somebody, fill it out. Say, hey, I want to get connected. This Christian life is not meant to be done on our own. It's meant to be done together. This letter was written to a group of Christians. We're meant to be doing this together. We're not autonomous. We're not on our own. The last thing is, when people are done with communion, we'll go back to our seats, and Kyle and Angie are going to start leading us in song, and we're going to sing. We get to celebrate this God who is so, so good to us. This God that is over the trials. This God that is for us. This God that is working. He's a good coach. He's putting those difficulties in our life to develop steadfastness in us. He wants us to be able to count it as joy. He is working to conform us more and more to the image of His Son. And we're going to sing and celebrate that. So let me pray for you, and then we're going to let you come take communion, or fill out one of these cards and put it in the box, or give it to one of us, and then we're going to stand and sing. Okay? Lord Jesus, we thank You for this day. We thank You for how You have graced us and blessed us, and we thank You even for the trials. God, in faith, I realize that in praying that and thanking You for the trial, Lord, some people saying that, they may not feel that. God, if I'm being honest, I don't feel super thankful for a lot of the trials that I'm going through. But God, by faith, God, I say thank You, because I trust Your word more than my feelings. So God, would You help us? Lord, we love You. We say thank You for all that You have done for us. We thank You for all that You have sent us. We thank You for every good and perfect gift that You have sent us. Whether that be a job promotion, or whether that be losing our job, whether that be a promotion or a demotion, whether that be a victory or a loss. Lord, we thank You for every good gift, for every perfect gift that You have sent our way. In Your good name we pray. Amen.